So you essentially sell your property to that trust, right? And then that trust sells it to whoever the buyer is. How do you set that up with the trust? Do you does it in your name? What kind of rights do you what is the legality of that with a trust?
Great question. This is what we do every single day, right? So we help facilitate all of this. My role is a third-party unrelated trustee, very important, okay? And we're like the offensive coordinator, and you're like the quarterback, Barry, right? And there's also a couple other people. There's a tax attorney legal team, who's a CPA tax attorney, who's thousands of closes, 25-year track record, billions under management, okay? Financial advisor, and we're all playing our role, and you're the quarterback, right? So we're making sure that you don't throw an interception, if you will, right? We're really making sure that you follow all the guidelines. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, we take all the pressure off in that you're not selling this thing to us today and we're just going to look for a buyer, right? You're also not paying us anything unless the deal closes. So there's no cost, no obligation. But step one, make up a name. You could call it the Hulk Hogan, Deferred Sales Trust, whatever.
I love that.
Name. It's a single entity business trust that only does business with you. Okay. And second, we insert the language into the purchase and sale agreement. Third, we help you sell your property. Four, the funds go to the trust instead of going to you personally. And this is important. You've become the lender, the bank, you're the bank now. You're the chairman of the bank. So you don't own the trust. You have lent to the trust. This is important. Now, the funds don't move without your signature. It's 100% protected, 100% safe. We use huge banks to hold the money. Everything's 24/7 access to view the funds online. But it's because of the lending part, right? We're IRC 453 versus IRC 1031. 1031, you're just selling ownership of an asset and then moving it into another asset that you own. In this scenario, you are lending to a trust which you do not own, and therefore you're receiving payment. What's the payment? Typically about 8% net of recurring fees over a 10-year period of time. That's compounding, right? So that $10 million example, you're going to receive, depending on your risk tolerance, probably 8%, depending on how the funds are invested. And we get that. It's not guaranteed results, right? But around 8%, give or take, over a 10-year period of time. And from that point, you also have unlimited time to invest in whatever you want at any time. So you can sell high and buy low, which is really important. In fact, one of the best deal stories I know is that we call it the Monday morning quarterback. This gentleman in Minnesota, he's worth about $200 million. He sold a property in 2006 for $20 million. And he said, you know what? These values are so high. I don't want to overpay in this 1031. I'm going to use the deferred sales trust thing. So he parked the funds into the trust, put some conservative investments, stuff that wasn't subject to crazy stock market dips, right? Just really safe stuff. Paid off his debt and just waited. Well, 5 years later, Barry, that bank calls him up and says, hey, that property you sold to that, that Joe buyer who overpaid for it? Yeah. Well, we just foreclosed on Joe, and we're just curious if you want to buy it back. Well, maybe. What's the price? They said, well, about 40% less than what you sold it for. So he says, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So what did he do? He sold out of his securities positions. He reallocated the investments to an LLC, and then he purchased that property back. All tax deferred, not using a 1031 exchange. Okay, so he sold high and he bought low. He didn't sell high and buy higher 180 days later, competing for offers, running around with too much debt, not enough liquidity, knowing he's overpaying, right? And that's like the one message, if I can get out to your listeners right now, is A, if Biden takes away the 1031, then it doesn't matter anyways, because we're gonna be one of the only game that's really viable and so flexible, the best solution in town. But two, even if you're looking at the 1031 exchange, do you really want to overpay? Do you really want to take on all that debt? Do you want to have very low cash on cash return? By the way, if you can find a deal, by all means, go for it. But we don't want anyone to ever feel like what the clients I saw on the streets in Sacramento getting hammered. I mean, guys who had, one guy in particular, he had like a $20 to $22 million portfolio. He had a ton of debt, and we pleaded with him. But this is like in 2006. Sell. This is the time. No, he's got it all figured out. He lost everything. Everything within 4 years was just gone. And it's like, had he just done this one thing, done the deferred sales trust, paid off all of his debt, waited on the sidelines, he wouldn't have to go through all of that heartache and pain. And so we can't get the message out fast enough, but it's getting out, and more people are looking at the deferred sales trust and using it.
You have just listened to another information-packed episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions with Brett Swarts. We hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. Visit capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to access the show notes and to access more resources. Don't forget to leave a review and join us again next time.